Hello, my name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. Can you guys see these lashes? Like, I'm looking in the view. These are amazing. So I got these in a subscription box because I subscribe to some beauty boxes, and like these things are huge. You can't tell me anything in these right now. Like, if you hide your man, because if I want him, he's mine in these lashes. Like, I am hashtag feeling it. But anyway, that's not what we came here for. We came here for Agatha Christie because she is a boss-ass bitch, and we are doing basically a year of Poirot in my lovely series called Project Poirot. And today we are talking about the third book in the Poirot series, which is called Poirot Investigates. It is a collection of short stories featuring Poirot in his early days of detecting, and it also features Captain Hastings, who is our narrator. And guys, we have a little bit of an upset on our hands. I started this whole project by saying that The Mysterious Affair at Styles, which is the first book in the Poirot series, was my favorite Agatha Christie book, period, and definitely my favorite Poirot book. But I think I'm gonna have to amend that because I liked Poirot Investigates even better, which I was very surprised by. I mean, it is short stories, and I've been on the record with how much I love Agatha Christie short stories, but I think it just works a little bit better for me than The Mysterious Affair at Styles, so I'm pretty surprised. I think now that I've realized this, so here, future editing me, I'm gonna start putting like my little ranking of where I think each book falls in terms of my personal preference. So I think I'm gonna say that Poirot Investigates is now my favorite Poirot book, and that The Mysterious Affair at Styles I'm gonna say is my favorite Christie novel, because I mean Poirot Investigates is a curated series of short stories, so I do feel like it's fair to talk about it as a book, but I mean in terms of full-length novel, yeah, I would still say The Mysterious Affair at Styles is my favorite for that. But anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get into why I liked this so much. So part of what I really liked about this book was that it was very clear that they were stories that were sort of building on each other, and I didn't do enough research to be able to tell you if that's through purpose, like if Agatha Christie wrote these stories to all go together, or if they're just curated really well in terms of their ordering. But what I found very charming was that as the book is going on, it definitely is developing chronologically, but it's also developing in terms of, you can feel Hastings' exasperation at his inability to ever really have a clue as to what's really going on build, and you can feel him sort of like building a little bit of resentment towards Poirot, not in like an angry way, but just sort of in a like, ugh, like, why? This guy is so arrogant and he's always right. Like, I'm just sick of it. So I found that to be really charming, and for me that made it work as a book as opposed to just a series of short stories. And I think really this is a book that is sort of a study. The more I'm looking at my notes, the more I'm realizing I think this book is essentially a study in that tension between romanticism and practicality, between goodness of heart and intelligence. Because, so for instance, I think that there's an interesting tension because Hastings is always accusing Poirot of being right because he guesses, because of luck, because of providence, whereas Poirot is very specifically right so often because of his intelligence, right? So it's interesting because whereas Hastings feel like Poirot is being right because he guesses, the reality is that Hastings is the one who is guessing and Poirot is the one who's making an actual deduction. So I think that's a contrast. I think that it's interesting that Hastings always is talking about Poirot as being very flashy or impractical. But at the end of the day, it's actually Hastings who's the one who's a real romantic and who is blinded by the fact that he's such a romantic half the time, and that's what keeps him from making deductions. So again, I think we have an ongoing theme throughout this whole thing will be this idea that perception, again, or as we say on Drag Race, what you see isn't always the truth. That is really the theme of this entire running series, especially I think when we have Hastings as our narrator, because he is just so blind to a lot of the things that are going on around him. So you might be thinking that, I guess what I was saying earlier was that Christie does ultimately, I think, say that friendship and love are more important than gray cells. You might be thinking it's easy, I think, to think the reverse, though, just with such an emphasis that Poirot always has on his little gray cells. But I think that Christie sort of undercuts that several times with how she characterizes Poirot, and just showing that he's not like a pure robot or something, right? So there's an instance in which he realizes that a woman has been basically indiscreet, like she hasn't really cheated on her husband, but she's just sort of had maybe what we would call an emotional affair, and rather than exposing her, he talks a little bit about how, you know, how he sees her remorse, how he sees how much she loves her children that she has with her husband, and how much she loves her husband, and he doesn't want to get in the way of that, so he sort of arranges things so that she doesn't have to face those consequences. So we see that side of him as well. And then I think another thing that's interesting in terms of how Christie frames the moral discussion is that there is one instance in which Poirot does deduce who done it, but they escape justice because there's just not enough evidence. But then at the very end of the sort of the last lines of the story are, we find out that the people who committed this crime were killed in a plane crash later. So there's this idea of providence, I think, that often comes into Christie, or coincidence, or chance. So it's not 100% unfeeling, cold reason that is important in Christie. I think that there definitely is always an element of sort of happenstance or providence that come in to a lot of her stories. And I think often her stories can have sort of elements of the supernatural. She sort of debunks that in one of the short stories in this particular collection, but I think that there's often sort of a suggestion that there might be something supernatural going on, and Poirot is usually just sort of content to not get into that for the most part. Like, he poo-poos it a little bit, but I think he also has moments throughout the series of being open to the possibility of something beyond reason or sense. Playing off of the last entry in the series with the murder on the links, where I was talking a lot about the English and French stereotypes that can come into play, I also think that in this particular, there's a story in this one where we reverse those stereotypes. So if you've read this collection, I think you'll know what that is. But anyway, so that's just an interesting note in light of the murder on the links. And then finally, a few things that just bothered me as a 21st century feminist woman reading back into this. There's just some kind of or it's not that it's anachronistic, I guess just of its time things in terms of how morality or characters are depicted that just annoyed me. So I wrote down the Orientalism in the Western Star story. So there's just like this weird fetishizing of Eastern Asian people in one of the stories, and that's honestly a common theme in 19th and 20th century British literature whenever we're talking about people from India or China. There's the lovely use of the term Chinaman, which is not awesome nowadays, and I'm not saying that to be PC. I just mean that I think that term belies a level of disdain or lack of taking seriously people from China. So, that I think to the modern reader is a little jarring. And then there were so many like lulz aren't women dumb about jewelry things in this book. And Agatha Christie was a woman, so that annoys me that she is feeding into that, because it would be more to my personal sensibilities if that was portrayed and then it was sort of undercut of like, men think that women are just dumb about jewelry, and then that is, sort of shown to be not what is going on. But she plays into that quite a bit. And then one final thing is, it's just interesting because Hastings explicitly says at one point that he disapproves of the new woman, and basically what he means is a woman who has a formal education. So, and in that particular story, Agatha Christie does actually sort of undercut what Hastings thinks about that. But anyway, just some things that, not really a criticism of the book, just things that stood out to me as a modern reader today, a reader of today trying to read something basically 100 years old that just doesn't always play totally great. So anyway, I think that's most of my notes. I feel like this is sort of a weird installment just because this is short stories as opposed to a straight through narrative line, but hopefully some of that was interesting. And like I said, I think the biggest takeaway I had was, I'm surprised this is my new favorite Poirot book. So that is that is the biggest takeaway for me. So if you are keeping up with Project Poirot, let me know what you thought of Poirot Investigates. Like I said, I really loved it, and I think that will do it. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined, and I think that will do it. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!